Hey there, and welcome. We're about to dive into something we all use literally every day. But let's be honest, most of us don't fully understand it. We're talking about money. We're going to peek behind the curtain of the economy and see how this whole machine really works. So let me start with a question that sounds super simple. What actually is money? Is it the cash in your wallet? The numbers you see in your bank app? Well, the real answer is way more interesting than you might think. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to nail down what money even is. Then we'll look at the role banks play. After that comes the really cool part, how money is actually created. And finally, we'll see who's in charge of controlling it all. All right, first things first. Before we get into the complex stuff, we have to get on the same page about what we even mean when we say the word money. Okay, so here's the official definition from the economists. Money is the set of assets that people regularly use to buy stuff from each other. Now notice it says set of assets, not just cash. That's the key here. It's not about what it's made of, it's all about what it does. And for something to count as money, it has to do three jobs. First, it has to be a medium of exchange. It's the thing you actually give someone to buy a coffee. Second, it's a unit of account, which is just a fancy way of saying it's the yardstick we use for prices. A phone costs $1,000, a soda costs $2. And finally, it has to be a store of value. You can stick it in your pocket today and spend it next month. And that leads us to the two basic kinds of money. You've got commodity money, like gold, which is valuable all on its own. But what we use today is mostly fiat money. That $20 bill, it's really just a piece of paper. The only reason it has value is because the government says it does. That's literally it. Okay, so now we get money. But what about banks? A lot of us think of them as just super secure piggy banks, right? A place to store our cash. But their role in the economy is so much bigger, so much more active than just that. And this right here is the whole secret. It's a system called fractional reserve banking. See, when you deposit money, the bank doesn't just lock it in a vault. They're only required to keep a small fraction of it on hand. That's the reserve. The rest, they lend it out. And this is where things get, well, kind of mind-blowing. This simple act of holding a little and lending out the rest isn't just how banks make a profit. It is the very engine that creates new money, almost out of thin air. Let's see how that happens. Okay, welcome to the main event. This is where we see the magic trick. We're about to watch how the banking system can take one little deposit and multiply it over and over again, actually expanding the amount of money in the whole economy. So, to make this easy to follow, let's use a really simple example. Let's say you go and deposit $100 in the bank, and we'll just assume the rule is that banks have to keep 10% of all deposits as reserves. That's our reserve ratio. All right, here's bank number one. Your $100 deposit is a liability to them because they owe it back to you. They keep 10% of it, so $10 as reserves. And then they loan out the other $90. Now stop and think about that. You still have $100 in your account, but now somebody else is walking around with $90 in their pocket. The money supply just jumped from $100 to $190. But wait, it doesn't stop there. The person who borrowed that $90 goes and spends it, and whoever they paid deposits it into bank number two. Now bank two keeps 10% of that, which is $9, and lends out the rest, another $81 of new money. You can see where this is going, right? It's a chain reaction. That $81 gets deposited, and a part of it gets loaned out. And then that loan gets deposited, and a part of that gets loaned out. It just keeps rippling through the entire banking system. So what happens when you add it all up? After the entire chain reaction is finished, that one single original $100 deposit has turned into $1,000 in the total money supply. It's not magic, it's just the money multiplier effect. Pretty wild, right? So you might be thinking, a system that can create money like that probably needs some supervision, right? You would be correct. And that's where the central bank comes in. In the US, that's the Federal Reserve. They've got a whole toolbox just for this job. And to keep this whole money machine running smoothly, they mainly rely on three big tools. There are open market operations, they can change that reserve requirement we just talked about, and they can change something called the discount rate. Okay, the first tool and the one they use the most is open market operations.
It's simple. When the central bank buys government bonds, it pays for them with brand new money, which pumps up the money supply. And when they sell bonds, they take money out of the system. It's a very direct way to turn the dial up or down.
The second tool is that reserve requirement. Remember our 10% example? Well, the central bank can change that number. If they raise it to, say, 20%, banks suddenly have to hold on to more money and can't lend out as much. That shrinks the money supply. If they lower it, banks can lend more, and the money supply grows. And last but not least, there's the discount rate. This is just the interest rate banks pay if they need to borrow money directly from the central bank. If the rate is low, it's cheap for banks to borrow, which encourages them to lend more, and poof, more money. If the rate is high, they're less likely to borrow and lend, and the money supply shrinks. So what's the big takeaway here? The money you think of as yours, sitting in your bank account, isn't just some static number. It's a tiny part of this giant dynamic system. It's created through a cascade of lending, and the whole thing is being carefully managed by a central bank trying to keep the economy humming along. Which really leaves us with one final fascinating question to chew on. If our money isn't gold or silver, and it can be multiplied by banks, what's really backing it all up? What gives it value? Maybe in the end, it's just our collective belief in the system itself. Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.